Hello friends, so today's video is going to be a list of some authors that I would love if they wrote more books. Of course you could say this about essentially any of your favorite authors, but in my case, someone like Brandon Sanderson already writes a ton of books and he writes them really fast. So that's not necessarily where I'm going with this. These are authors who maybe I've read something of theirs and I'm like, ooh, please, I hope you're writing more books. I don't know if you are, but I hope you are. And then some of them are actually authors who the works I have picked up I didn't love, but I've found myself saying in talking about them, I would definitely read something else by this author. And so I want them to write more books. Before jumping into it, a big thank you to GlassesUSAcom for working with me on today's video. I've been working with GlassesUSAcom for years at this point. It's where I get all of my glasses. I actually use their glasses in their service before I ever worked with them. I think they're fantastic, and part of what makes them great is they make glasses more affordable. They take the middleman out of the equation so that you can get your glasses for a better price, and you have so many different styles to choose from. Recently, I have been wearing my clear frames all the time because they're the ultimate neutral. They go with basically everything. I love the shape. I love the size of the frames. They have blue light blocking lenses as well if you work on a lot of screens, and you can get that on basically any pair. You can also get transitions lenses, and you can get prescription sunglasses. So I wear these all the time when I'm outside, when I'm driving. I just think these are absolutely great. So between this clear pair and this pair of sunglasses, I'm good to go, but they do have so many other styles that you can choose from. And if you're a little unsure about getting glasses online, they do have a try-on feature. And if you don't know what your prescription is, on their app, you can actually scan your glasses to figure out what your prescription is. Again, a big thank you to GlassesUSA.com, not only for working with me on today's video, but just in general for continuing to work with me. I think they're absolutely great. Both of these lenses, as well as some other links in the description bar down below if you'd like to check them out. The first person I'm going to mention, I know so many of you feel similarly, and they're almost the inspiration for this video. Also, if they never write again, that is totally fine. This video is kind of entitled because it's sort of a, please write more books for me to be entertained by. Thank you very much. But I'm sure a lot of us would love for this individual to write more, and that would be M.L. Wong. So M.L. Wong wrote The Sword of Kaigen. I know so many of you loved The Sword of Kaigen. When I read it, there is a chunk at the beginning that feels very heavy in the amount of exposition we get, and everything is delivered in a very straightforward manner. And then you get some interesting flashbacks that feel very unfitting initially. And then the middle of the book, the way the flashbacks play a role in one character's development in the middle of the book, just how tragic the story is, the kinds of characters that you get, which are very different from a lot of other fantasy stories, and just in general, the emotional pull that this book has is incredible. I say so often that I love just sitting with characters in their feelings, and this author does that, and they do it phenomenally. So the whole middle chunk of the book, it definitely plays around with your expectations. It takes where you think the story is going to go, and it goes in a completely different direction. And then you process things with the character. It forces you to experience the things that they are experiencing, and it just does it in, again, a phenomenal way. The beginning was not my absolute favorite, and the very, very, very end was also not my absolute favorite, but that middle chunk is done so well that I think that this author has, if they write more books and they do what they did in this one, I can't think of another series really, or another author who is able to tap into what this author tapped into quite the way that they did. They just did it. It was fantastic. And I want more books that do what this book did, what The Sword of Kaigen did. And I want more authors to be comfortable just sitting with characters and their feelings. I think this is, of course, a personal preference, but I would rather have that than a lot of action scenes, which this book also had a lot of action scenes, and they were very good action scenes. And there's one action scene in particular between two characters is not only a great action scene, but the emotions and the importance of that scene for the characters it's so good. So if she ever does grace us with another book, I will be very, very happy. Next up, big surprise, who surprised no one. Jen Williams. Jen Williams wrote what is one of my favorite trilogies, which would be The Winnowing Flame, aka Ninth Reign. That's the first book in the series. I loved the series so much. It was unlike anything I have ever read. I think the marketing even illustrates that by the comparisons that they make. So you know how a lot of times books, the marketing will be like, the next Game of Thrones, and you're like, no, it's not. And it has like random books that it tries to say, it's like this and this. This one said it was like J. Kristoff and Robin Hobb. What does that even mean? I don't know. I think that was their way of saying, I don't know what this series is like. Let's just have two fantasy authors that are as unalike, I feel like, as you can be in fantasy. Let's just say it's like those two, which is their way of saying it's like nothing else. And I agree. I have never read anything like this. It's so imaginative. It's so creative. The characters are fun and infuriating and ridiculous, and also you can't help but root for them, and they're charming, and there's just so many different layers to the characters, and they're very different from one another, and you can't help but love them, and you can't help but love other characters that get introduced more so in book 2, and the stakes get so high, and they're raised every single book, and it's so good. You have all heard me talk about this series so much. So I believe Jen Williams wrote a thriller, of all things, kind of recently, so I might check that out. And I know that she has written, I believe, some short stories or shorter works, but I want another fantasy series. I'm probably going to check out the thriller at some point, but yeah, I want another fantasy series, because there aren't too many other series that have made me feel all the things I felt in that series and that have been so interesting, where I'm like, tell me more about this world. Tell me more about the history of these people. Let me be confused for longer, because oh my gosh, what's going on? Like, I loved so much about it, and I want more. And also funny. This story, the Winnowing Flame trilogy, has some very funny, cheeky moments, and I enjoy the humor. And I would like more of that also. I just love it. And I would love if Jen Williams gave us some more. That would be great. Next up, we have Leo Carro, who wrote The Wolf. This is a story that, while ultimately it didn't really work out for me, this is one where I've said I would read something else by this author. And it's primarily a chunk within the middle of this story that is the reason that I'm like, sir, I would like to see what else you do, because that was great. And that middle chunk I've mentioned in the past, it's so much about the intrigue and the clever ways that these two opposing characters keep trying to screw everything up for the other person. And the way that they, at times, involve bad things for other people that are not one of the two of them. Like, the civilians of this particular place will be affected, and that is a weird power play for the other one who is trying to be undermining. And they're supposed to sort of be working together for the good of their people, but they don't. And sometimes it's the other people that end up having to face consequences. So it's definitely very morally gray or just straight up villainous. And sometimes the character who is more so the hero, some of the deals that they're making, you're like, I don't think that's gonna go so well for you, or I don't know that you should go down that path. That doesn't seem wise, seems actually a little slimy, and I really enjoyed it. I really enjoyed these characters going head to head and playing politics, basically, against one another. I thought it was fantastic. So I would love if this author did that, but most of another book was all of that. Next up, we have Lanie Taylor. Technically, there are some other works by Lanie Taylor that I still need to check out. I need to finish the Daughter of Smoke and Bone series. And there's another series that she wrote that I, for the longest time, didn't even know existed. So there are other things by her that I can read. However, Strange the Dreamer and Muse of Nightmares were so good, and I have been waiting for the next thing that she does. I just think that she writes such unique fantasy, and a lot of times authors will do fairy tale retellings, or they will do stories that are inspired by fairy tales. Lanie Taylor, to me, writes very original fairy tales. That's what it feels like. It feels like I'm reading something that is actually this old story, and it's a retelling, or it's this old story that is just bizarre but whimsical but bleak but also hopeful. It's just got all these interesting, creative, dark things to it, and I would love another work like that. I've just never read anything else quite like Strange the Dreamer and Muse of Nightmares. The themes, the compassion, it's so well done. It's young adult, but honestly, not that young adult books can't be heavy and can't dive into these deeper themes, but this kind of goes beyond the label of young adult, and I think it can be enjoyed by so many people of so many different ages, like anything, of course. But this particular one, there's just so much to take from it and get out of it from different points in your life even, and I would love to go back and reread it. And I feel like I've never cried reading a book, but there are some things about that story that if I went back and read it again, I wonder if I would cry, because there's just some things that are so beautiful and some things that are so tragic, and there's forgiveness, but also there's should this other person be forgiven, and loss, and there's just such pain within these people, and it explores why people make the decisions they do and why they lash out or why they're so bogged down with sadness, and it's so good. Like I said, like nothing else I've ever read before, and I want more. Next up, we have Fiona Lee. Similar to Lanie Taylor, Fiona Lee does have other works that I could definitely check out, and I probably will check out her young adult series at some point. I read Jade City, and I know so many people love it. I thought I was going to be head over heels because there's so many things about Jade City that I would expect to like. It's got all the checks. It checks off all the things that I typically like. It's got the we sit and think with characters. It's got the kind of scheming that ends up having big consequences. It's got the kind of juicy, oh no, that's what happened. And then it's got violent things that you're like, oh dang it. It's got all of the big moments and the little moments that you crave in a sort of story like this. And it also has a slightly different setting, which I always appreciate the uniqueness. And this one, I'm sure most of you are familiar, but it's kind of more so like our own world. It is a fantastical world, but it's almost dystopian sci-fi like in that it's just kind of our world, but a crime family who has control over a lot to do with jade. Some people have powers associated with wearing jade, and those individuals end up kind of running things. So this gang plays not only a big role in the lives of citizens, but also in the government. And the way that she does all of that, I thought clearly she put so much thought into just every little detail of what they would be a part of. And they also have a rival gang that they're going up against. So I thought she executed it so well. I just didn't love the characters. So I just want something else along these lines, because I really appreciated so much about that story. Like I said, I just didn't love the characters, and so my heart did not break for them the way it did for a lot of other readers when things would go wrong. And I would love another series by her along those same lines, and hopefully with characters I love. I think it would be fantastic, or whatever other creative thing she comes up with, because I think that she did something very unique in this series, and if she does something totally different, also unique, I'm down to try it out. Last on the list would be Erin A. Craig. They have written House of Salt and Sorrows and Small Favors. Both are horror fantasy, and both I greatly enjoyed. I don't pick up a lot of horror. I don't pick up a lot of horror fantasy, but these two were so much fun. I've said before that House of Salt and Sorrows is quite tropey, and while it's got a lot of things I would say I'm pretty familiar with, I still had such a good time reading it, and I still thought it was quite creepy. And then Small Favors I have talked about a number of times, so I'm not going to go too into it, but I had such a good time reading that. I was always so intrigued by everything that was happening and every creepy thing that would come up. I'm like, oh my gosh, what's going on? And I had such a good time with it, and I can't wait for the next thing that they write, because I'm sure it's going to be to my liking. But on top of that, I personally felt like there was a step up, a pretty big one, between House of Salt and Sorrows and Small Favors, and I'm so impressed by just how much I think that their writing and the way that they told the story improved from book to book. Again, it doesn't mean that objectively one is better than the other, but I just was so impressed by that, and I can't wait to see what they do if they write a third book. I'm sure there are so many other authors I could have included on this list, but that's it for now. Definitely let me know if you agree and would love to see these authors do more, and then also let me know some authors that you would have on this list. But anyway, thanks so much for watching. I hope you have a great rest of your day, and I'll see you all later. Bye.